Okay, welcome back to the Intentional Teacher Podcast. I am super excited to have you here because I have our first guest expert teacher on the podcast, and her name is Julia Martin, and I'm super excited to have you. So, welcome to the podcast, Julia.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. I first met Julia when she joined my program, Intentional Teaching, which we're going to get into today. And now Julia is doing all sorts of wonderful things, like starting a TPT store. And you're doing your master's, aren't you?
Yes, I've just started my master's thesis.
Amazing. So we're gonna get into all of that stuff today. But first, how about maybe you could tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you teach?
Thank you. Okay, so I am a fourth year teacher and I teach French. So I'm certified pre-K through 12th grade, but right now I'm teaching 6th through 12th grade French. So middle school and high school French in Illinois. So I'm here in the US. So I have an exploratory 6th grade class. 7th and 8th grade is broken up into French 1 part 1, French 1 part 2. And then in the high school, I'm currently teaching French 1, 2, 3, and 4. So those are like the four main levels that we have in most high schools here. And so, yeah, I've just graduated with my bachelor's degree, jumped right into teaching French. And then also my very first year teaching, it was COVID, and I started my master's degree at the same time. And so now it's been a long process, but I've just now started my master's thesis while teaching. And it's just been so much fun and so exciting to learn all these new things and have so many different experiences going from online to hybrid to fully in-person teaching just at the really start of my career.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And one thing I think that you kind of said, like, quickly, like just in passing, is that Julia teaches middle school. So a lot of some you might be listening, you might be in Canada, you might be in the States. So she's in the States. And you teach middle school and you teach high school. So do you still drive from one school to the next in the middle of the day? How does that work?
I do, and I'm really lucky with my schedule because it's broken up like half and half. So in the
Mhm.
morning I'm at the high school and in the afternoon I'm at the middle school. So I don't have to like run back and forth a bunch of times. It's just like really organized, like high school in the morning, middle school in the afternoon.
But still, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think if I have ever, I think only if I've supply taught, I have had to change schools in the middle of the day. I don't think I've ever had to teach in the like change schools in the middle of the day. So that is a lot. Like you have a very busy day.
Yes, and we have like a small school district, so I feel like smaller school districts, you're gonna have like more grades or more levels you're teaching. Just because if you only were teaching one, like I know like in Chicago, that's like the big city in my state, there's like ginormous high schools. So probably those teachers are teaching like the same level all day long because there's so many students at those schools. But I'm in more rural Illinois, so all of our towns are very, very tiny. So that means we have small
Mhm.
schools. So you're just teaching a lot of different levels and a lot of different grades as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I found talking to so many teachers is that a lot of us, like, like if you're in Canada, maybe you're teaching like French immersion, like a 6-7 split or something like that. Or if you're teaching high school French, maybe you're teaching 1 through 4 or, 9 through 12 if you're in Canada. But then there's all these other kind of challenging teaching situations where people will say, like, oh, I teach 4 grades in one class, or I have to
Oh,
go
yeah,
from like one school to another, or I have 7 different preps. Like
yeah,
it can be quite a lot.
definitely.
Yeah. So let's go back to a little while ago, before you joined intentional teaching, which I think was probably around June or July 2022, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yep.
Yeah. So tell us before you joined intentional teaching, like what kind of inspired you to join? What made you think about that this might be the thing for you?
Well, I was so glad when I like because I didn't know you beforehand, but I just saw like your reels on Instagram, your posts on Instagram, even not following you, it was just like suggested posts because I follow a lot of French teachers. And
Mhm.
I was so thankful when I saw that because it was like at the exact right time that I needed that. Because okay, already going in and starting teaching in the midst of COVID, in the midst of a global pandemic, that was crazy. We had like green and gold days, and so it was like half the students were in person on green days, and then the other half on gold days. I was teaching my first year teaching. I was part-time, so I had hybrid level classes. I was teaching French 1 and 2 hybrid, French 3 and 4 hybrid, and so it was like a mix of like green and gold, French 1 and French 2, and it was just like I think at one point there was like 6 different groups that you were managing because it was like also online and in person. And I felt like when I wasn't doing that, I was just frantically planning and trying to create curriculum because I was basically given a blank slate, which now I'm very thankful for because it allows me a lot of freedom and creativity. But as a first year teacher with all that chaos, I was a little bit overwhelmed. And second year teaching, I was like, okay, I have a year of experience underway. I feel a little bit more confident. But then in November of my second year teaching, I was hit unexpectedly with some health complications, which ended up turning into a chronic illness diagnosis. And so walking through that in just my second year of teaching, it really started to shift my perspective from, I can just make it all happen no matter how many preps I have, no matter how much time I need to spend, like I can just put more hours in. And that was my only strategy, was to put more hours in. So if I had to like stay at the library till really late and like, because our school is like part of a university, it's a laboratory school. So there's a giant library on campus, and I would just stay there till like midnight every single night and then start teaching at 7 a.m. And I was like, it's okay if I need to stay till like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. and start teaching at 7 a.m. because before I got sick or before I was dealing with health complications, that was doable. I wouldn't say sustainable probably for anyone, and that's not a good idea to do, but it was doable for me. And that was my only strategy, was just put more hours in, put more hours in, put more hours in. And then when I got hit with this, it really just made me take a step back and say, I cannot keep doing that. That is not going to work for me. But that was really my only strategy. So November of my second year teaching, I was dealing with chronic illness through all of second semester. And then that summer, I had kind of been hopeful that it would get better. But by that summer, I realized it wasn't necessarily something that was going to go away in 4 months, 6 months, 12 months, 15 months, like we had maybe thought. It was more an undetermined amount of time. We don't really know when the end is in sight, and it's still something I'm walking through now. So I just kind of felt like I got to the end of my rope and I was in really need of help, just to know, how do I manage this new challenge in my life on top of having to prep for so many different classes, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, French 1, 2, 3, 4. It seemed like so much, and I wasn't able to juggle it. I wasn't able to continue to put in those hours because physically my health was putting a limitation on me that I'd never had before. So that's when I said, I need some strategies, or I need something to help me make it through this next year. Going into my third year teaching, I felt more panicked than I ever felt before and so overwhelmed. And at that time, I saw your reels on Instagram and I saw you were offering this intentional teaching class. And I was like, I have to sign up. And I am so thankful that I did, because that was the first time I was able to get more strategies other than just put more hours in, which is probably terrible advice. Like if anyone is ever just like, oh, you know what you need to do to make this sustainable and work for you is just put more hours in, that's terrible advice. And that was the advice I was giving myself. So it was really at a point where I needed to look outside of myself for advice and wisdom. And that's what you provided through intentional teaching. And that's kind of really what was a turning point for me to be able to go into my third year teaching and say, okay, I might not have control over my health situation, but what I can control is the systems, routines, and organization of my classroom that's going to save me time and energy and just make things run a lot more smoothly. So now that I'm having to juggle a lot more in my personal life and with school, I'm able to do it in a way that doesn't make me burn out in just the first 3 years of teaching. Because that was something we were told in teaching school a lot, is like a lot of teachers burn out within like the first 5 years. And to be that is like scary. That's like a scary statistic. And you were like, I don't want to become part of that statistic of, oh, yep, that's just another teacher that, went into the profession and burnt out, because I'd always known my entire life that I wanted to be a teacher. My grandma was a teacher. My mom was a teacher. teacher as a little kid. I was helping out in my mom's summer school classes, and I was like, I feel like this is what I'm called to do. I feel like this is what I was meant to do, and I just really want to do this and thrive in it. But I think sometimes we're not taught the strategies that we really need to implement to be able to thrive in it and not overwhelm ourselves or burn ourselves out.
Totally. Yeah, I have so much to unpack there. Like, first, I would say, well, funny, I have a lot of teachers in my family too. I think a lot of us do. Like sometimes
Mhm.
when you talk and you realize that there's like a family of teachers, like if you've been
Yes.
listening to me for a while, you might know that my husband's a teacher, I'm a teacher, my mom was a teacher, all sorts of aunts and uncles, grandparents were teachers. So I am with you on that. But that is an overwhelming theme that I have noticed from a lot of teachers that I've worked with is often, and this is what hit me too, was like the strategies that I used to use
Mhm.
before having this big change in my life no longer work for me. So sometimes I've had clients who say, like I had a health issue, or I've had cancer, or I've had some sort of really big health problem in my life, or
Yeah.
I've had kids, or I have little kids. And the things that I used to do just don't work for me anymore. And I just so feel that like I think this idea that we teach even is like, oh, just, do your best, work hard, show persistence, show grit can
Yeah.
be helpful up until a point. But then there's this idea, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Julia, but the law of diminishing returns.
Oh, no.
I did back in the day, I did do some economics in my degree,
Wow.
and this is the one thing that really stood out to me is the law of diminishing returns. So, I don't know, Julia, do you drink coffee?
I do, yes.
Yeah, I love coffee, but the law of diminishing returns is very clear with me for coffee. Like the first coffee is like delightful. I love it. And then you want another one, you're like, yeah, that was still good. I'm okay. But if you keep drinking coffee, it's
Yeah.
going to start to do the opposite, and you're going to start to feel like
Mhm.
shaky or uncomfortable, or you can make yourself ill. Like
Yeah.
it's good and it's good. And if you imagine this kind of peak and then it starts, the more you have, the worse it gets.
Yes.
And that's how I kind of feel with the idea of working hard or working longer or just keep going until it's done. Yeah, it's important to teach like our students, and for us, like we do want to do a good job and we want to work quote unquote hard. But if we take it to the point where it's going to hit that law of diminishing returns, like, yeah, we're not just going to sit around and just, tell the kids to go and do some coloring or something. But there is a point where we hit that it's actually going to be hurting us rather than helping us. So I think you make a really good point about that you needed to change your strategy.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I've noticed that, um, maybe sometimes when you're putting in less hours outside of the workday, you're able to be more present in those hours that you are in front of the students.
Mm,
So, like, if I'm just giving 110% while I'm right there in front of the students, I'm present, I'm with them, I'm able to, like, hear them and be more responsive, and I feel that I'm not exhausted. But if I've put in so many hours outside of that, then I'm exhausted. And then am I able to give 100%? Am I able to give 110%? Maybe it's more like 50% because my energy and my mental capacity isn't there as much. So changing those strategies has really allowed me to take time back for myself and spend a lot less time outside of the classroom. And then I feel like it's counterintuitive to think I'm spending less time outside of the classroom. I'm able to give more of myself, more energy, and be more present inside of, like, while I'm teaching the students, like in that those moments when we're face to face. You would think almost it would be the opposite, but I found that it's kind of counterintuitive how it works out, that when you pour into yourself first and you make sure that you have like the energy and the strength to do what you need to do during the school hours when you're working with students, then you're able to provide a lot more for them than if you're just burning the candle at both ends and just trying to work
mhm.
and create the absolute perfect whatever. And we talk a lot in intentional teaching about not having to have everything be perfect. And a lot of times I would pour so many hours into making something quote unquote perfect. And then it's like something the students aren't even going to notice. And then you're too tired or exhausted to really put
Yeah.
your all for those things that will make the most impact with the students.
Totally. And if you're listening, I just want to give you permission around that too, because I think sometimes we think it's like the amount of effort that we've put in, or I need to do this much to be able to support my kids, but it's really not about the number of hours that we've
Mhm.
worked that actually contributes to learning. Because when you think about it, it's really about like being present, or you can just have a spark. Because I think we have all experienced that moment where we just said something to a kid and it just clicked, and we didn't have
Mhm.
any lesson prep to create it. But then all of a sudden the student really understood something. It was the way that we said it, or we were more present with them, or we just understood them in a different way. And then we were able to make the shift. So it's really not about how much necessary, like, yes, we want to prep our lessons, don't get me wrong, but it's not about creating this perfect lesson. That's what's going to create the learning. Oftentimes it's the opposite. It's actually being able to leave space and like that room for magic, almost, that you have that presence that you can really see where they're at and then teach them what they need, rather than pouring all our energy into creating these perfect lessons.
Yes. And another thing, when you said it's not about the time you spend outside of the classroom, something that I heard a lot about growing up was time management, but
Mhm.
something I never heard about was energy management until intentional
Yes.
teaching. And that was something you brought up, and that was a mindset shift for me because I was realizing sometimes it's not about, oh, I don't have enough time. It's
Mhm.
you might have more than enough time for all the things that you want to do or think you should do, but is that going to be a good use of your energy? And so, dealing with health issues, it takes a lot of your energy out. So, you don't have the energy that you used to have. And so, realizing that I need to manage my energy wisely, not only my time, but also my energy, that has helped a lot because I think as teachers, we can get really inspired and be like, oh, I have all these ideas. I need to do all
Mhm.
of them. And they need to all happen right now. And then if you do all of them and you try to like make everything happen, it might not be a good use of your energy and you're draining your energy really quickly and by like burning yourself out by trying to accomplish everything. But rather, you should like prioritize things and say, okay, I have a lot of good ideas. And right now, I'm just going to focus on this one. And then maybe those others can come at a later time and just trying to manage that energy and your workload in that way as well has been something that's been really helpful for me. So for me, that looks like, okay, I might be able to get a lot more done in an evening, but I might intentionally choose to say, okay, instead, I'm going to go on a walk or I'm going to read and have quiet time or I'm going to spend time having good meaningful conversations with friends because those are things that are going to fill me up and make me feel rested and full of energy so that I have that energy to contribute to my teaching instead of like, I'm going to knock out 5 different projects every single night. Because when you do that by like halfway through the week, you're like, how am I going to get through the week?
Like,
And
why am I so exhausted?
exactly. And before I was like, well, I was just thinking of it in the concept of time and not of energy. And energy is also a resource that is so valuable that we have to be very wise with.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because really, like, some of the mentors that I've learned from say that it's not about time management, it's about energy management. Because, like, if we take the same task, like, say you have to do some grading or some marking,
Mhm.
and you have 20 minutes in the morning when you've had your coffee or
Yes.
you're refreshed or whatever, and you're in your prep and you spend 20 minutes and you can get it done in 20 minutes, that same task, if you do it at 9 p.m. on the couch when you're exhausted, is going to take you way longer and you might not finish.
Yes.
So, energy management is
Yes.
huge. And the
Ever
other thing that I'll mention too from what you said is you said about having a lot of ideas. And
Mhm.
that's one thing that I'd like, if you're listening to this, to think about is I've noticed that people tend to have tendencies that can
Mhm.
help or hurt us. And some people have a lot of ideas, which can be amazing, but also challenging. Or you might be someone like me who's like, and then I'm just going to add this thing to it, and I'm going to make this thing better. And then I'm going to add this bit to my workload. And then I'm going to join this committee. And then I'm going to add this. And I just like add way too much to my plate. Or some people just like give and give and give and are super nurturing and don't nurture themselves back. So that's another thing that we've been talking in the program right now is like, what's your natural kind of tendency and where can you bring it into a more helpful side of it versus a harmful? Because the ideas, like you said, can be amazing because then you can
Mhm.
create these beautiful things like you do for TPT,
Thank
but
you.
it can also harm you because you
Mhm.
just want to act on every single idea that pops
Yes.
into your head.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, that was something my very first year of teaching. Every single idea, I was like, well, if it was an idea that popped into my mind, I have to make it happen. And some of them were very
Mm.
elaborate and it would just take a lot of time. And then I was like, okay, maybe I can prioritize this a little bit more and say like this quarter, I'm going to do this project. And then next quarter, I can do another one and I can spread it out more, or even say, oh, I'll just save that till next year. And then I'll add that on after I already have this
Ah.
thing. We figured it out and it works really well. Now I can add on another fun sort of activity or event for the students instead of saying like I need to figure it all out in 1 year or in one go, because that can be a lot to try to manage and juggle. So definitely energy management is huge. And ever since I made that shift, just like you were saying, like if you're doing something in the morning, it might take 20 minutes versus when you're exhausted at the end of the day, you might not even get it finished. I literally saw myself getting tasks done in half the time, a fraction of the time it used to take me, because I was making sure I had the energy when I was sitting down to do them instead of just like pushing through and doing everything for
Mm.
hours and hours on end at like very low energy. And I was like, oh my word, I'm gaining time back by managing my energy. And it was more about that than managing time. And I would have never come to that epiphany realization on my own.
Oh, that is so amazing. Well, I love it. Yeah, that actually leads me to my next question is
Ah.
what's been possible for you now? Like what is your teaching and your work-life balance look like now? What have you been able to do?
Oh my goodness, it looks so different. I feel like I was starting to put the pieces into place last year and then practicing with that. And now this year, I just feel like it's running like a well oiled machine, like everything just fits into place. And so, another strategy I gained from intentional teaching was like systems and routines and like structuring my class. And so that not only has been good for my teaching because it's shifted it from being very direct instruction to student
Mhm.
centered, but it's also just helped me in my planning time. So you talk about domino routines, and I had never heard of that before, but it's like this idea of you can do something in your routine that's going to have this domino effect that's going to allow you to knock out a lot of other jobs or accomplish a lot of other things. And I think before I was just like, there's so many different tasks. Like there's so much to manage in teaching. I was getting coffee with a friend on Monday actually, and she was like, "You're a teacher. I feel like teachers have to be so organized." And she stepped into a new role in campus ministry, from nursing to campus ministry. So ginormous career shift. And she said before her job was more just laid out for her, like you do this, this, and this, and it was like very specific tasks that she would just go in and do. And now it's more like you have to figure it out. You have to be the one coming up with what you're going to do. And I feel like that is very much applicable to teaching because we don't just show up and have it ready for us. Like you have to have thought of it and like have a plan going into the day for anything to happen. um,
Yes,
that's
you're
very
it.
yeah, you're it. Um, I think there are other jobs like that, of course, but I think that is something that is very characteristic of teaching. So she was asking me for advice of how to be organized because she's like, I feel like this is a skill that teachers really have to have. And so through intentional teaching, I learned about systems and routines. And so now I have systems and routines in my own class that just make it run so much more smoothly. So, one thing I do is like making copies. Like one day of the week, I will make copies for all my classes. And I have these like colorful drawers. And so, like, we have Mondays entry tickets, Monday and Wednesdays, it's the same thing. Then Tuesdays and Thursdays and Friday. And then I have like print 1, 2, 3, 4. And in each of those drawers, I have folders. So it's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I'll just put the copies of the activities or whatever we're doing in order. And I just organize that either at the end of the week or the beginning of the week. So I might do it like if I'm planned through Monday, I might do it Monday evening, or if I'm not, I'll plan it on Friday and I'll do that, and that'll be the last thing I do before I leave. And so that's been a routine, having bell ringers and like a structure to my class every day. That's been another routine. We also have like portfolio binders that we keep in class. And I've even seen students create their own routines. So they always get their portfolios out at the beginning of class, and they keep their bell ringers in there. They keep all their activities in there. And so one group, they said, okay, we need to assign someone from our table to get all of our binders. So you'll be Monday, you'll be Tuesday, you'll be Wednesday, I'll be Thursday, you'll be Friday. And so then it's like that person knows they're going to grab like all 6 binders for their table and bring them over. So even they're creating routines, and it just takes a lot of the pressure off of you for classroom management, because instead of like always reminding them like, okay, make sure you're getting your bell ringer out, make sure you have your portfolio binder, make sure you're turned to this page. They just know what the routine and the pattern of the class is, and they know what it's going to look like flowing through the lesson. And they know that Tuesday's Mardi music, they know that Thursday's Jeudi Maj. And so they're already like, oh, today's this day, this is what we're doing, this is how we're starting the class off. And so that takes a lot of the planning off of you, because you're not reinventing the wheel every single time, which is what I was totally doing before. And it was so much direct instruction, and it's like then at some point you're like, are they even listening to me, or am I just going on and on and on? And now it's so much more student oriented, and even there'll be times that I think I'm going to be leading the activity, but they get a hang of it and a good understanding of it so much that they're like, can we lead, can we do it? And then they're up running the game. And so then you just get to walk around and like check in with students, and they might have a story they want to tell you, or you might make a really meaningful connection with a student and just like have that aha moment where they're like, I was really confused on this, but now I understand it. So that's been a shift for me to understand those routines. And since I am the only French teacher at my school, part of what I do is like, what curriculum am I going to use? And I was kind of just creating it on my own, and that was a huge undertaking. But knowing these systems and routines, it gave me this lens to look at and say, like, I want a curriculum that lines up with that lines up and supports those goals, and not something that's just random and all over the place. And so I have that this year, and I'm using brand new curriculum. It's actually what I'm doing my master's thesis about, which is really exciting. But the way I got to find it or came upon it was really, really exciting, and it's a fun story in and of itself. So I think probably in Canada, a lot of people know the singer-songwriter Etienne. And I know a lot of people, in the US know him as well. So I grew up listening to his music in French classes. Like, I had not studied French until I was in high school. And we would sing all of his songs in French class and all this. And I started using his music when I was a teacher as well. And the students were so obsessed with his song Ale, the one that goes, Je vais, tu vas, il va, elle va. And so we would sing it, and they would go crazy. Like the science teachers, the Spanish teacher, because in 6th grade, they rotate to different languages. They're like, the students are always singing this song. You'll hear it down the hallway. It's hilarious. And so I was like, okay, I have to do something with this. So I decided I would dress up as Etienne, and I did this whole big thing where I like answered the classroom phone, and I was like, oh, Etienne's here, I'll come down to the office to let him up to my classroom. And then I went out in the hallway and like put on a disguise with a hat, and it was when we had masks on, so I had a hat on, I had sunglasses on, my face was covered with a mask, I had like this jacket on and like all these necklace beads. Like, it wasn't very accurate to the actual Etienne, but it was like my version of it. And then I came back in class and I was like, bonjour, je suis Etienne, and I started singing, and like all the students got so excited at the end, they all ran over to me and they're like, can I have your autograph? And so I signed fake autographs for the students. And it was really, really fun. And then like maybe a couple months later, I get an email from Education Perfect, which is like a teacher learning platform. And they said, you're invited to this Zoom, or not Zoom, but it was like an online speaking thing. And Etienne was going to be the keynote speaker for this like online event. And so I was like, oh my goodness, I have to go. Like, I've known his music personally, and now I teach with it. And so I was like, I have to go. So he was there, and it was like this one-way call. So it wasn't like 2 ways like we have right now.
Mhm.
but there was a chat box. And so I put that whole story in the chat box, and I was like, this is what I did. And I dressed up as you, and my students love your music and all of this. And so that was really great. And he responded back to me, which I was so surprised at the time that I would get a response, because I'd never met him before. And he was he's this famous person. So I was like, wow. And he was like, you're the exact type of teacher I'd love to work with, and actually come to schools and do concerts. Would you want me to come to your school for a concert? And I was like, no way. So, Lauren, last year, ATN came to middle of nowhere, Illinois,
Oh
and
my
performed a
gosh.
concert at our school for the middle school and high school students. And it was so incredible. And something he does at his concerts is he gives curriculum or like resources to the French teachers. And I was like, yay, free resources. This is incredible. And I started using them. And then I was like looking at his platform, and it was everything we talked about in intentional teaching, except already done for you in curriculum. And so this year I've started using his curriculum fully in my class. Part of it is like the DJ Delph kit. And so there's these readers, and the readers are the thematic units, and they're interactive comprehensive readers. And I'm using them through all my levels, middle school through high school. And I'm just using different readers at different levels. And it comes with activities, it comes with curriculum, it comes with backwards design, it comes with assessments, everything. And I found that it really supports the learners because it is based on these systems and routines. And it's exactly what we talked about in intentional teaching. So not only do I have this idea of this framework that we learned about in intentional teaching, but I also have resources that are aligned with that. And so it's like that intentional teaching, it gave me that lens to know what to look for. So when I saw this after meeting him, and I was like, what? This is exactly everything I learned and had been looking for. And so, like with the bell ringers, we have Sujet du Jour on Mondays and Wednesdays, Mardi Musique on Tuesdays, Jeudi Mage on Thursdays, and Anime du Jour on Fridays. And the students know it, and they're always like, oh, is this what we're doing on this day? They're like, oh, it's Mardi Musique. What song are we listening to? And like, that's how I start every single class. And then I literally have a binder, and it has different sections for each of the readers, and it has all the activities. And then I just take that, and I have like little bookmarks for each of my levels, and I'll be like, okay, we left off on this activity. And so I'm going to make copies, and I'll go through, and then I'll put them in my folders for all the days of the week. And then I put those in the drawers, and then I'm done. And all I have to really do is show up and then just grab the things out of the drawer. And it's aligned with curriculum. Like we use Actful, but it's also aligned with like Ontario and BC standards and different things. So you see like how it's going to meet the learning standards depending on where you're teaching from. And that has just been the coolest thing ever for me, to just like have that support in those routines, and just have seen such a difference in learning, that it is the difference it's made in the learning of my students this year, because they are just so much more confident in what we're doing. It's scaffolded in a way that like they're supported. And I really feel like routines helps with that scaffolding too, because if it's something different every single day and they do not know what the class period's going to look like at all, already I feel like you've lost their attention.
Yeah, totally.
And if you don't have their attention, you're like fighting for that. And that can just take up so much energy and so much class time. And because it's based all around routines, they have the confidence where I'm not even the one stepping in and saying like, hey, you guys, you should lead this. But they're the ones telling me like, we want to lead it. Like, instead of you doing it, can we lead it? And they're taking so much more ownership over their learning, and there's so much student choice. And I was just so glad to find curriculum that reflected all the principles and all the strategies that I had learned in intentional teaching. And so I felt like just really beautiful how like all these things fell into the right place at the right time. When I met you in summer of 2022, I was at like rock bottom, end of my rope. I really, really needed that class desperately to help me make it through the next year. And then, I was working through that and making so many strides in the right direction. And then we got to have the ATN concert, and he provided me with curriculum that was just like aligned perfectly with all those principles. And it just was like that next step. And really that's helped me so much, because something you've helped me with is opening my own TPT store, which has been so much fun. But also there was a time that I was like, it's always something I've wanted to do, but I was like, am I ever going to have time to do that? Because I feel like I'm just constantly trying to catch up with my own teaching for like my students. So how am I going to have time to do a master's and open a TPT store. But now that I have all these systems and routines in place, I'm like, oh, I have time to do a master's thesis. Oh, I have time to run a TPT store. And it's all these things that I just have opened my mind to being able to do so much more than I ever thought I would have been able to do before.
So good. I have a few things. Before we wrap up, I do want to hear about your TPT store. The
Okay.
two things that I wanted to highlight from what you said is the first is the idea of like student energy
Mhm.
versus your own energy. And if you are listening and you're the kind of teacher that ends up feeling exhausted at the end of the school day, sometimes we need to think about how much we're pouring into our kids,
Mhm.
especially if they're like leaving the class and they're just like outrageously excited and are just like bouncing off the walls and you've got nothing left. It
Mhm.
might be because you're pouring into them and they're not pouring back. So I love that you've created this way that like the kids are involved too. So it's not just you giving and giving your energy. And the other is the idea of having a lens to choose the right resources for you. Because sometimes
Mhm.
people tell me I don't have enough resources
Mhm.
or I don't know what resources. And usually it's because you're missing a piece of how to actually look and find the right resource for you. So you had the foundation, you had this like the system that was going to work for you. So then when you found the right resource for you, it was like it was a no-brainer.
Yes, exactly.
So how about let's finish up. I would love to hear about your Teachers Pay Teachers store
Thank you.
so the teachers listening can hear a little bit about what it is that you create.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I recently added a lot of resources to my TPT
Fantastic.
store. Thank you. And I feel like I have like two main things that I'm doing right now on my TPT store. One is, like I said before, I have all these ideas and I love making learning French a really immersive, exciting experience for the students. So it's like authentic and hands-on. So I'm creating like pop-up field trips and like different things like that that are just like bring the French and Francophone culture into your classroom. My most popular resource currently on TPT is the Paris Metro. And so basically it's activities and worksheets that students can do to navigate the Paris Metro, but it also comes with all the different signs that you would find, well, maybe not all of them because that'd be a lot, but a bunch of different stops for the Paris Metro, the directions, like are you going towards Châtillon-Montrouge or Saint-Denis Université on like line 13, for example, and they get to actually navigate it and you can set it up in your classroom. Or what I've done before is I set it up in an entire school. So you can even get students involved in it. And so we'll have like Francophone clubs set up the Paris Metro, and then the next day students come into school and the whole entire school's been transformed into the Paris Metro. And then on morning announcements, I'll have them play the da 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 da, like
Oh, that's so fun.
the SNCF sound, and then they'll like go into the announcements. And like we even do it a lot of times, we'll do it around like Poisson d'Avril, and I'll hide like the fish in the metro and they'll like have to find ones that have like a little Paris monument on the back of it, and they'll like earn a prize if they find one of those. And so it'll be like a whole school-wide scavenger and they're navigating the Paris Metro. And then in our classes they actually like do the directions and write it out in French, and we have resources. So that is one activity I have up. I'm also working on pop-up field trips for the Paris Olympics coming up, and then art-based ones on like French museums, and then street art in Guadeloupe. And so those are just some pop-up field trips that I have going on, but those have always been really successful in my classes and getting students engaged and excited in the learning. So that was something I wanted to contribute or like be kind of like my own unique voice on Teacher Pay Teacher. So if you're looking for activities like that, definitely check out my page because that's basically the main thing I focus on. But the other thing I've been focusing on kind of connects to what we just talked about with like having that lens to find that curriculum that works for you. So as I've been using this curriculum, there's so many great activities. And so I actually reached back out to ATN and I was like, hey, I created these vocab picture cards that go with your curriculum. And I know like it's using your curriculum. So can I post this on my Teacher Pay Teacher? What do you think? And he was like, absolutely, go for it. So what I've done in partnership with ATN and the DJ Delph kit, which is the curriculum I use, for every unit, I have vocab picture cards, and it comes with 11 different activities that you can do with them. And it's aligned with the activities in the different projects that you would find in that curriculum. So that I also have put all the links. So if you want to find the same curriculum that I'm using, it's linked in these activities and these resources I'm selling on my Teacher Pay Teacher store. So that's been really cool to actually be able to find this, have this lens to know what to look for in curriculum, find this curriculum, and then partner with the curriculum to create resources for my own TPT store. So it's like this full circle moment. And so I've uploaded, I want to say 8 different ones. And then this weekend, I'm going to upload the final like full bundle with all of the vocab picture cards that go with the entire DJ Dolph kit curriculum. So I'm really, really excited about that. So if you're interested in the curriculum, that might be a good first place to look as well.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, I didn't even know that. She didn't even tell me before we started. I love that you went from working in the library till 12 o'clock to now doing your master's and connecting with Etienne and like creating curriculum and collaborating with him and now being able to share with other teachers. It's just so amazing.
Yeah,
That's so
if you would have
fantastic.
told me I would have been here at the start of my career, like just 4 years down the road, I would have been like, there's no way. But here I am, and I just feel so incredibly blessed to be able to have had the opportunities and experience and meet incredible people like you that I have been able to meet, and just so many wonderful people in the French teacher sphere. That, and I just feel like if we collaborate and we share our voices, we're able to support each other, and just there's so much more strength when we work together.
Absolutely. I'm so with that. And I hear so much from teachers who are burning out, who are going on stress leave and things like that. And I think when we can actually like come together, it makes such a massive difference.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Julia. It was amazing to have you. We will, if you're listening, we will link all those links up in the show notes so you can discover Julia's all her new resources and all of that stuff. And we will link it up in the podcast notes. But in case for folks who are listening, what is the name of your Teachers Pay Teacher store?
Oh, thank you. Yes, the name of my store is Madame Martin's Core French.
Fantastic. Awesome. So we will link that up in the show notes. Julia, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
Awesome.